2.
Okay, well, we talked about neurotransmitters in the last video. This video is going to be a little bit different. In this video, we're going to start out, we're going to talk a little bit about research and assessment. And so, whenever we do research, we have something called value of assessment. In other words, what makes something really good? How do we know if it's something good? Well, the value of assessment, and I'll ask you this on your test. The value of assessment depends on 3 factors. Okay, 3 factors: reliability. Okay, R-E-L-I-A-B-I-L-I-T-Y. Reliability, validity, and standardization. Okay, so we've got reliability. Is it reliable? Validity, is it valid? And standardization, can it be standardized? So let's talk about what all 3 of those mean. Okay, reliability is the measure. Is the measure consistent? Is it going to be reliable? If somebody's reliable at work, they're consistent. They're there every day. They're doing the same thing all the time. They're consistent. So is the assessment reliable? In other words, reliability means, is it consistent? In other words, if I were to test it 10 times, would I get that answer 10 times? Because if an assessment's not reliable, then that means one time I got this weird thing, so I'm going to come out and tell you some type of research. I'm going to say, oh yeah, look what I found out. And it's like, no, it's a fluke deal that happened one time. That wouldn't be reliable. Now, validity, okay? Validity. Does the test measure what it is designed to measure? Okay, is it valid? Does it measure what it's designed to measure? All right. So I want to come in and find out if something is valid. I want to know if I want to test. Let's talk about the neurotransmitters again. I want to know if GABA shuts off. I want to know if GABA shuts off the behavior of sadness. Okay. So it's like, okay, validity. So let's measure something in our foot. We're like, okay, does this measure it? No, it doesn't, because it doesn't have anything to do. It doesn't measure what it's designed to measure. That was a stupid example. Thank you. Okay, so reliable, is it consistent? Valid, does it measure what it's intended to measure? And then standardization, can it be standardized? In other words, can it be consistent across all these different measurements? So like, for example, if a test is done in Russia, is it going to also standardize to the United States? In other words, if it's done in one place, is it going to be good everywhere? Because if not, then we've got a problem. Okay, so standardization. That's why in school we always say, oh, we take these standardized tests. What does that mean? It means that if you're taking a test here at Mesalands, then it's going to be the same as if you're taking a test at University of Southern California, or you're taking a test at Washington University, or you're taking a test in Russia or Europe. Is it standardized? Can we make a comparison across? So research, as well as the different things we talk about the value of assessment. When we test something, when we check something, depends on 3 factors. Is it reliable? Is it valid? And does it have good standardization? So we're going to talk about some things later that don't have one of those 3. You've got to look, because there's a ton of stuff, and internet's crazy, and you can Google anything, and a lot of people have a lot of stuff out there even to Google, and you're like, that's ridiculous. Well, you say, well, why is it ridiculous? Well, it has to be one of those 3 things. Is it reliable? Is it actually consistent? No, some guy out in Siberia found this, and nobody else ever found that. Okay. Is it valid? Does it really measure what you say? Well, that's not even valid. What they didn't even measure that. He said, he or she said this is the result, but what they measured didn't even measure that. Or is it standardization? Somebody says, okay, here's this research. This is good for you, that's bad for you, this causes cancer, whatever. So you say, well, the problem is that has no standardization. Just because that happened to this person doesn't mean that's going to happen to me. Okay, so once again, you got to kind of, this is a good thing for you. It's a good thing for you in college, because if you're having trouble with somebody saying something, and you're like, that's bogus, that's not right, and you're like, so what you do is you have to look at it, because if it doesn't have all 3 of those, then chances are it is bogus. Okay, is it reliable? Okay, is it reliable? Is it consistent? Is it consistent over and over? And you say, no, the reliability on that. Nobody's going to probably argue with you too much if you look at this from a tangible view. So you don't like what somebody's saying and you think it's just like, say, I use the word bogus, meaning, you're just like, that's crazy. You're not right there. And so you say, well, that's just not, the reliability is just not there. Okay, it's not consistent at all. Okay, or you say, no, the validity is not good. It's not valid. That does not actually measure that. Just because you tested that and got those results, it doesn't mean this. Okay, it's like a Geico commercial. Their validity is totally wrong. They say, okay, if this and this and this, then this and this and this, then so go buy Geico insurance. So it's because what they're talking about is not actually affecting insurance, so it's not the validity is wrong. And then standardization is, once again, you say, well, there's no standardization of that. Meaning, just because that worked for you, that doesn't mean that's going to work for other people. So once again, it's a big thing. As you assess information that comes through your mind, through conversation and other people, that's a good thing to remember in your lifetime. You might even have this discussion with your kids someday, and you go, well, that's a pretty good idea, but the problem is that one's just not consistent, so the reliability is wrong. I don't know. Your kid's probably not going to want to have that conversation. Okay, so now let's talk about, we're going to move on a little bit. So now we're going to talk about clinical assessment. Now, when we talk about clinical assessment, we're talking about a medical deal here, okay? And let me give you this, okay, and then we'll talk about it. So, clinical assessment. I'm going to say, what is clinical assessment? What are the areas that it involves? Well, first of all, it's the systemic evaluation, okay? Systemic means the entire system, okay? The entire system. Systemic, not just one part. Systemic. It's a systemic evaluation and measurement of, okay, now here's the different things in a clinical assessment. It's a measurement of psychological, okay, all right, psychological, how we think, okay, all right, biological, how our body works, and social factors in solving a psychological issue. So a clinical assessment is a systemic evaluation and measurement of the psychological, biological, and social factors in solving a psychological issue. Okay? So I just want you to know, once again, there's 3 parts to that. Now, we have something else that we're going to study in this class. We're fixing to kind of get into some fun stuff, actually. And you're not going to be a psychiatrist. You're not going to actually be a doctor of psychology here. But you're going to begin to assess some of these case standards. So one of the things we do is we do a mental status exam on people, okay? So we do a quick assessment, okay? We do a quick assessment in 5 areas. And I want you to know what is on the mental status exam. We do this all the time with people, even though you don't realize we do this, all right? So here's what we look at in somebody's quick assessment of mental status. We look at their appearance and behavior. Sometimes we're tricked by their appearance and their behavior, but we look at the appearance and behavior. We look at their thought process. We look at their mood and affect. Mood and affect, A-F-F-E-C-T. How that mood affects them, okay? Now, once again, affect is something that we have within inside of us, okay? How does it affect us? If I'm sad, then it comes out, and how does it affect me? It makes me feel down. It makes me feel a little bit depressed. It makes me unhappy. Okay. Now the effect is what causes that mood. Not the affect is what you see. The effect is what caused that. Okay. What caused me to be sad? Well, whatever. So mood and effect. And then the next thing we have is intellectual functioning. Now that's kind of tricky, but we actually look at this and we say, how is somebody functioning intellectually? Do they seem to be, for their age, seem to be making the right kinds of intellectual decisions and thought processes? And number 5 is sensorium, S-E-N-S-O-R-I-U-M. It's how all of their senses working. Do they seem to be picking up things around them? Do they, how's their sight? How's their hearing? How do they take in smells? If somebody is totally oblivious to everything around them, then the sensorium is like, oh my gosh, they're just not picking up anything with their senses. So once again, we'll come back and talk about this a little bit later, but mental status exam, you know, and I don't want to just skip over to your test here, but the 5 things you need to know for that involved in the mental status and quick assessment: appearance and behavior, thought process, mood and affect, intellectual functioning, and sensorium. So we go on from there, and I'm going to give you a couple of areas. I'm going to give you a couple of abbreviations. The first one is GAD, capital G, capital A, capital D, and I'm going to ask you what it stands for on your test. GAD, G-A-D, stands for General Anxiety Disorder. Okay, General Anxiety Disorder. Now, a general anxiety disorder we talked about earlier. An anxiety disorder is a little bit different, and it has to be more than 30 days. To be GAD, to classify it as GAD, a general anxiety disorder, it must last for at least 6 months. 6 months of general anxiety. So when we talk about GAD, that's general anxiety disorder. Now when we talk about PDA, okay, that's not public display of affection, okay. PDA means panic disorder with agoraphobia, okay. A-G-O-R-A-P-H-O-B-I-A. PDA, okay, that's panic is the P, D is disorder with, and then agoraphobia. Okay, once again, A-G-O-R-A-P-H-O-B-I-A. All right. Now, in this, okay, individuals experience severe unexplained panic attacks. Okay, so that's the panic disorder, is panic attacks. What are panic attacks? Something triggers a high anxiety level. Remember Judy and the blood. So every time Judy had something associated with blood, she had a panic attack. Boom. And a lot of times she fainted or passed out or whatever. Now let's talk about what agoraphobia is, okay? Because they never know when the panic attack may occur, they develop agoraphobia because they don't know. They're always thinking, this could happen to me anytime. What is agoraphobia? It's fear or avoidance of situations. Okay, agoraphobia is fear or avoidance of situations that you feel unsafe. So when you see this situation coming on, then you just avoid it. That's agoraphobia. And so you don't feel comfortable, so you're like, oh well, I will never do that. So here's Judy with this. This biology deal. Remember the blood, and she went through all this deal. So she had PDA. She had agoraphobia, in that she would just avoid everything that had to do with blood or knives. Or remember, even when somebody told her cut it out, Judy, she was like, oh my gosh, they got me. Oh my gosh. Okay. So once again, PDA, that's panic disorder with agoraphobia. And then I've got another one here. This one you probably have heard of, and well, I say you've heard of it. It'd be easy to figure out. This one's called nocturnal panic. Okay, nocturnal panic. Now, if we think about what nocturnal is, that means night, and panic means fear of and causing some type of anxiety. So nocturnal phobia is scared of the dark. So not to leave you in the dark, but we're going to end it right there. And that is actually everything you need to know for test 3. And I'll see you for test 4.